In the early hours of August 28, 1976, police were called to a small house in Oceanside, California. Inside a guest bedroom, they found famous child star Anissa Jones dead. She had been lying there for hours before anyone realized she wasn't going to wake up. Around the room were prescription bottles, loose pills, and the remains of a night that had spun completely out of control. It was obvious this was not a simple overdose. When the toxicology results came back, even experienced investigators were stunned. According to later accounts, the medical examiner described it as one of the most severe cases he had handled. She was only 18 years old. Most Americans didn't even recognize the name Anissa Jones. They knew her as Buffy, the cheerful little girl from Family Affair. What happened in the years between those two versions of her life is where the real story begins. She was born on March 11, 1958, in Lafayette, Indiana. Her parents' marriage was already falling apart, and by the time she was a toddler, they had divorced. Her mother moved Anissa and her brother to California, hoping for a fresh start. Like countless families arriving in Los Angeles, acting was never supposed to become a career. It began almost by accident. At 6 years old, Anissa had the kind of face casting directors remembered. Small, blonde, and naturally expressive, she could shift from playful to heartbroken without looking as though she were performing. After appearing in television commercials, she was brought in to audition for a new CBS sitcom called Family Affair. She got the part. The series premiered in 1966 and became an immediate success. Anissa played Buffy Davis, a little girl who moved into her wealthy bachelor uncle's New York apartment after tragedy struck her family. Buffy carried a doll named Mrs. Beasley, and within months the doll had become almost as famous as the actress holding it. Toy stores struggled to keep it on their shelves. Children wanted to dress like Buffy. Parents wanted daughters who smiled like Buffy. Millions of viewers believed they were watching a happy little girl growing up on television. They weren't. Behind the cameras, Anissa's life no longer resembled that of an ordinary child. School was arranged around filming. Public appearances became routine. Her childhood was planned by production schedules instead of school calendars. Adults decided where she went, what she wore, what she said in interviews, and when she smiled. Success arrived so early that she never had the chance to discover who she was without it. The show ran for 5 seasons, making Anissa one of the highest-paid child actors on television. To the audience, Buffy never seemed to change. She remained sweet, innocent, and effortlessly lovable. But children don't stay 6 years old. As Anissa grew older, the industry that had built its image around her began looking for the next little face to adore. The cameras that had followed her everywhere slowly turned toward someone else. In 1971, Family Affair was canceled after 5 seasons. One week, Anissa was working on one of America's biggest television shows. The next, the phone stopped ringing. For child actors, fame often comes with an expiration date. Anissa reached hers before she was even old enough to drive. Puberty changed the image that had made her famous. The little girl audiences adored was disappearing. The hardest part wasn't losing the job. It was losing the identity that came with it. For nearly 6 years, everyone had called her Buffy. Strangers recognized her in restaurants, shopping malls, and airports. Then, almost overnight, she became a former child star. At home, things were becoming just as complicated. When Anissa turned 18, she finally gained legal control of the money she had earned as a child. Reports at the time estimated it was several $100,000, a fortune for someone barely out of high school. Friends seemed to appear everywhere. Some had connections to Los Angeles's growing party scene. Already immersed in a culture where prescription pills, cocaine, quaaludes, and PCP circulated as casually as alcohol. The people around her changed. So did the nights she spent with them. Those who knew Anissa later described a young woman desperate to be accepted for who she was instead of the television character everyone remembered. She wanted to escape Buffy, but the people entering her life often saw something else they could use: her name, her money, or the access that came with both. By the summer of 1976, Anissa Jones had been legally an adult for only a few months, but the life she was living bore little resemblance to the one America thought it knew. She drifted between friends' houses and parties across Southern California, spending time with a crowd where drugs were common and almost never questioned. Prescription sedatives, quaaludes, cocaine, PCP, and barbiturates circulated freely. For many in that circle, mixing substances wasn't considered unusual. It was simply part of another night. Anissa's money made her an easy target. Several people who crossed paths with her during those months later admitted she was generous to a fault. She paid for meals, bought gifts, covered expenses, and rarely seemed to expect anything in return. The fortune she had earned as a child disappeared far faster than it had been earned. People were happy to enjoy what she could provide. Far fewer seemed willing to tell her she was heading toward disaster. She was trying to build a new life, but without acting, she seemed to drift from one group to another, never staying grounded for long. Her drug use had become heavier. Nights stretched into mornings. The line between recreational use and dangerous dependence had almost disappeared. Then came August 28, 1976. Anissa spent the evening moving between friends before arriving at a house in Oceanside, California, where several people had gathered. Witnesses later told investigators that drugs were being used throughout the night. Exactly who supplied each substance has never been fully established. By the early morning hours, Anissa had taken a combination of drugs that no one around her seemed to appreciate was becoming lethal. At some point, she lost consciousness. Those in the house reportedly believed she was simply sleeping. Hours passed before anyone realized something was terribly wrong. By the time help was called, there was nothing left for emergency responders to do. The investigation that followed answered one question almost immediately. Anissa Jones had died from an accidental overdose. But it raised another question that has never completely gone away. Exactly what had been found inside her body was so extreme that it stunned even experienced investigators. The autopsy did not point to a single fatal drug. It revealed a body overwhelmed by several. Investigators found a dangerous combination of secobarbital, a powerful barbiturate sold under the brand name Seconal, pentobarbital, another fast-acting barbiturate, cocaine, PCP, known on the street as angel dust, and quaaludes, the sedative that had become synonymous with 1970s party culture. There were also traces of other medications. None of these drugs worked in isolation. Together, they placed enormous strain on her heart, lungs, and central nervous system. The official cause of death was ruled acute drug poisoning. Medical experts later noted that the amount and variety of drugs in her system made the case unusually severe. The substances affected her body in different ways. Some slowed her breathing, others distorted perception, while stimulants forced her heart to work harder. The combination proved fatal. The investigation itself moved quickly. Detectives interviewed the people who had been with Anissa that night, trying to reconstruct where the drugs had come from and who had supplied them. But proving exactly which person had provided which substance was another matter entirely. Several people admitted drugs had been taken during the gathering, yet no evidence established that anyone had intentionally poisoned her or forced her to consume them. Without that proof, the case remained what the coroner had ruled from the beginning: an accidental overdose. Still, one question lingered. Anissa had only recently gained control of the money she earned as a child. She wasn't working steadily. She wasn't surrounded by family. Yet she was moving through a world where highly addictive prescription drugs and illegal narcotics were available with alarming ease. In mid-1970s California, prescription pills were often shared, traded, or sold far beyond the patients they had originally been prescribed to. Quaaludes and barbiturates were especially common in party circles, and enforcement was far looser than it would become in later decades. Legally, the investigation ended. Morally, it never really did. No one was convicted for supplying the drugs that ended her life. No broader conspiracy was uncovered. The people who had spent that night with her returned to their lives, while the story the public remembered became painfully simple. Another child star, another overdose. But the tragedy was far bigger than the final toxicology report. By the time Anissa Jones died, the little girl who had once made millions of Americans smile had spent years searching for a place where she was valued as something other than Buffy. She never found it. Anissa Jones was buried only days after her death. The headlines faded quickly. The moment news broke that the former Family Affair star was gone, attention shifted to something she could no longer protect: her estate. She had inherited control of the money she earned as a child only after turning 18. Although much of it had already been spent, what remained became the center of a bitter legal dispute. Her father, who had been largely absent for much of her childhood after divorcing her mother years earlier, came forward to claim a share of the estate. Her mother challenged those claims. The disagreement soon moved into court, turning Anissa's death into another family battle. For people watching from the outside, it was a painful pattern. As a child, adults had managed her career. As a teenager, adults surrounded her while she drifted deeper into drug culture. After her death, adults fought over what she had left behind. The legal proceedings stretched on, forcing the courts to decide how her estate should be distributed. The money itself was no longer the fortune many imagined. Years of spending and legal expenses had reduced it considerably. Even so, it was enough to divide a family already fractured long before Anissa's final night. The tragedy also forced uncomfortable questions about Hollywood's treatment of child actors. Anissa had earned hundreds of thousands of dollars before she was old enough to vote. She had worked long hours under studio lights while becoming one of the most recognizable children in America. Yet when her career ended, there was no system waiting to help her adjust to ordinary life. Fame disappeared almost overnight, but the emotional damage did not. Her story would later be mentioned alongside other former child stars whose lives unraveled after early success. Different names, different circumstances. The same pattern: children celebrated while they remained profitable, forgotten once they outgrew the roles that made them famous. Today, Anissa Jones is still remembered as Buffy, the cheerful little girl holding Mrs. Beasley on Family Affair. That image has survived for decades because it is comforting. The truth is not. The real Anissa Jones died at 18, carrying far more than the weight of a drug addiction. She carried the collapse of a childhood lived in public, the pressure of growing up without the identity that had made her famous, and the consequences of a world that applauded a little girl but had no idea what to do with the young woman she became. In the end, America never lost Buffy. It lost Anissa long before the overdose made the news.